so much. Just took me one moment there. So good evening. My name is Betsey Nuseibeh, and I teach the Music and Health course, the 2090 Music and Health course through the UC College of Medicine for undergraduate students. I'm also a predoctoral research fellow at the Indiana University School of Nursing, where I am building a program of research with a focus on improving the health-related quality of life for cancer survivors through the use of music interventions. So I've worked in the field of music and music therapy for over 20 years now. And in 2008, I founded an organization here in Cincinnati called Melodic Connections, a nonprofit studio that provides services to all ages and abilities and creates partnerships with key institutions in the city. And when I was the leader of this organization, we worked with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Cincinnati, Cincinnati Public Schools. I love working with music organizations and finding ways to help musicians and people that love music, from amateur players to people that love listening to music on the radio on the way to work in the morning. I love helping people find ways to incorporate wellness into their musical enjoyment. I have a bachelor's of music and music therapy from the University of Iowa. I have a degree in oboe performance from CCM at the Conservatory of Music. I have my master's in special education, also from University of Cincinnati, and hopefully soon I will have my doctorate in focusing on music and wellness, in a doctorate in public health. So, as Lisa said, as we begin this portion of the night, please put all of your questions in the chat. She's going to help me monitor that, and hopefully by the end we'll have some answers for those questions as well. Thanks. All right, so our schedule for the night. We are going to talk about music and stress and how music might help with our stress. So we're going to first examine some vocal techniques that we can use that might potentially help in our stress reduction. We'll talk about some theory about how and why this might work. I'm going to lead you through, should you choose to join, some humming, toning, and singing. And then after that, we're going to look at how we might use music to build some intentional playlists and how we might incorporate really some, intentional listening into our lives, both for relaxation and to energize us. And then I will save some time for questions at the end. So, as we begin together this evening, I would like to invite you to join me in a moment of mindfulness. And during every portion of this evening, I truly want to invite you to make ongoing decisions about your level of involvement. Sometimes you may want to just sit back, close your eyes, and turn up the volume on your laptop, and just kind of passively allow the music to envelop you. And other times you might want to dive in and sing and even move with the music. Sorry about that. And maybe even move with the music and the sounds. The important part is that you're here tonight. Maybe you learn a couple of things, and or maybe you confirm a couple of things that you already know, and participate though in the way that feels best for you in each moment tonight. So let's take a moment and mindfully bring ourselves to this space together. So each day and every moment of each day and every hour, we're breathing in order to keep ourselves alive. But how often do we take the time to think about our breathing and our breath? Maybe think about using it to help us relax. So we're going to begin this evening with a few deep breaths. So if you would like, I invite you to sit in your chair with me now. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and uncross your legs and your arms. Feel your feet flat on the floor. Perhaps you wiggle your toes so that all four corners of your feet are touching the ground. And I invite you now to begin with your breath. Breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. In through your nose and out through your nose. Continue breathing as it feels right. Your hands now might be on your knees with your palms up or down. And as we are focusing on sounds tonight, maybe you really start to tune into the sound of your breathing. In through your nose, out through your nose. And as you continue to breathe, really start to notice the feeling of your legs in your chair. Notice your sits bones, how they're resting in your chair. Feel the strength of your back and your neck holding up your head. As we've tuned into our breath, know that our breath is directly connected to our voice. And when we use them together, it can help bring mindful attention to our breathing. So if you're feeling comfortable, close your eyes, breathe in through your nose, and on your next exhale, maybe you begin to hum. Remember to relax your body, your facial muscles. You might wish to place the tip of your tongue behind your bottom front teeth. Perhaps as you hum, you'll feel your face muscles start to relax a little more. Maybe start to relieve a little tension in your face and your throat. As you go, and you start to get a little more comfortable, maybe you even experiment with higher and lower tones. And what feels right in this moment and produces the right amount of vibrations for your body. Some of you might like a lot of vibrations, and some of you might like a little less. You might really feel it here in your cheekbones. You might want to place your fingers lightly on your cheekbones to feel those vibrations. But just really let that tension slide out of your jaw and your face. Relax your face muscles and feel the energy of that hum within your body. Maybe you slide around and wherever that vibration and that pitch feels right, just for one more moment. So, as we bring mindful awareness to our space, some grounding, we can possibly move on from humming as a warm-up to a technique called toning. And we slowly open our lips on that exhale with toning. And with this, we're not concerned necessarily with a specific pitch, just sort of higher or lower in our bodies. We're just kind of creating a tone, and we're not worrying if we're in tune. We're just making a tone, making a sound, and really the focus is on that exhalation of breath and making a sound as we do it. Um, However, when we do when we do this toning, we can add some specific vowel sounds that kind of help us move that sound around in the body, and maybe help relax spots that we might feel tight, or finding some of those tonal centers. So for example, I have up here on this slide the chest area. So if you're able to place your hand on your chest and you take a breath and you exhale now with your lips open on an ah, you might feel your sternum vibrate a little bit. And you might begin to feel a little kind of a release of some energy through that area. Ah. This is always kind of amazing if you're doing it with other people in the room, if you start making some harmonic vibrations and you start feeling them. And if you have had kind of a tough day, if like me, you've been staring at a screen all day and you're feeling tight up here, kind of in those sinus areas, you can move that tone up to an E. So it would make more of a sound like this. We would smile with our lips and go from that ah to an E. And now you're kind of placing your tongue behind your bottom front teeth, and you're flattening that tongue, placing it a little bit closer to the roof of your mouth, kind of near that soft palate that you have, and you're making some higher sounds. So you're moving the pitch up, and you should kind of feel those vibrations in your face. And some people love it, and they kind of even say that they can start to feel a little drainage up there even. And some people don't. So if it doesn't feel right, go back to the hum or an ah. So we can go from an ah to a smile with an E. And if you're really feeling like you need to ground yourself down a little more, you might want to move to an O. So you kind of find something that feels right. Again, we're not necessarily worried about the pitches. We're thinking about those exhalations in our body and what those sounds with them kind of mean. And so this technique of mindful humming and toning, it actually can, research has shown that it can decrease our heart rate, potentially lower our blood pressure. In the physical realm and on the psychological side, when we see that decrease in heart rate and lowered blood pressure, we also start to see perhaps some decrease in stress and anxiety, and we're able to kind of focus and clarify the mind, and really kind of center in on what's happening in our body and mind in these moments. But let's talk about now some reasons why this might happen. So, stress. For the purposes of this evening, I'd like to pose a couple of definitions for us. So the first is that of stress. And I'd like for us to think about stress as the effects of a real or perceived threat to homeostasis, and a stressor as a potentially threatening condition that might cause those stress effects. And then homeostasis is that sense of balance that we have, that everything is right in the world. And we can think about it as, maybe you've heard of rest and digest mode. So our heart rate's kind of at its baseline. Our breath rate is at our individual baseline. And our muscles are relaxed. They're not overly tight. They're not overly loose. We don't feel like we're in danger. We're calm. We're at peace. We are being. That's kind of how we might think of homeostasis. And so then stress, when something stressful comes along, we hear those first rumblings of thunder in the distance. Maybe the car in front of us on the highway, it brakes suddenly. Or we remember that we have to speak in that work meeting today. Some sort of a stressor, either to our physical homeostasis, our psychological homeostasis, just generally the effects of this stressor, which would be maybe the thunder, the car, the speech. The effects of that stressor on our homeostasis would be the stress. So if we move forward then with that understanding, we know it's not simply the stressor, but our perception of our ability to process that stressor that yields that stress response. So the car that brakes ahead of you, are you on your way to work and you're late after having a fight that morning with someone in your house, so your heartbeat's already elevated and you're breathing, oops, I keep doing that, and your breathing is shallow. Are you already kind of elevated when you're in the car and that car ahead of you brakes? Where then is your ability to brake and react and have that moment? So that's your, if you're feeling like you have less time, less of an ability to deal with that stressor, that's when our stress response goes up a little higher, right? What happened the last time that you presented at a work meeting? Did your supervisor praise your accomplishments? Did it go really well? Or did you come up short on that report? Do you see your coworkers as really friendly and welcoming, and or are they kind of oppositional? Did you have too much caffeine and your heart's already racing prior to giving that speech? I mean, so it's where our body is in that moment of time, both physically and psychologically, that affects our perception of that stressor that's coming in, and then how our body responds to that, and what kind of a stress response that our body then has to that stressor, right? And this, I think, is really interesting to look at via I like these two diagrams. So what we have here is that baseline heart rate, our homeostasis, that is this blue line here. On the left, you see a mild acute stress reaction. On the left, we see this kind of homeostasis at the very beginning there. And that's our parasympathetic nervous system. It keeps us kind of calm and grounded, and it's the strength of that parasympathetic nervous system that helps us maintain that homeostasis, right? So then, depending on where we are, some sort of stressor comes at us and we have a stress reaction, and we go from that rest and digest into that stress reaction into fight or flight. And that's where you can see the red here. It takes over. That's our sympathetic nervous system, which creates that fight or flight. Now we're at the ready. We're ready to, run from that tiger, as they say, right? And then with time, the parasympathetic nervous system does rebound, and then we see that return to a homeostasis, or return to normal. And you can see that in a mild acute stress reaction, right? We have the stressor, the sympathetic nervous system reacts, and then we rebound and we go back into homeostasis. But what happens when, let's say, we have that fight in the morning and then we get in the car, and we're already with that elevated heart rate because we're running late, and we're running over the words that were said in our mind, and we're having this stress reaction, right? And our sympathetic nervous system is online. It is activated. We are in fight or flight, and you can see that here with this high, the high red with the stress response, right? And before we're able to have that parasympathetic rebound, then another stressor comes at us. And so the sympathetic nervous system just sort of stays online, and we don't have time for that rebound. And the parasympathetic, when this starts to happen over and over, and we go from one stressor to the next without having time to recover, that's when we start seeing that what's called a diminished tone in our parasympathetic nervous system, diminished vagal tone. And that's where we start having that higher reactivity to stress because our sympathetic nervous system is ready to jump. It's at the ready all the time. So, and we start seeing lots of stressors that come in as challenges, and it's really hard. It's hard to recover from that then. So here's the thing though. We can do some things to help ourselves rebound. We can do some things to help our parasympathetic nervous system rebound and to strengthen that nervous system. And not surprisingly, given the topic of this evening, music is one way that we can build that kind of parasympathetic muscle, if you will, that nervous system. So music as an intervention, it might be one solution and one way to help ourselves through this stress response and build a stronger stress response. So music therapy is the use of music by a trained music therapist to provide a tailored experience. It might focus on musical elements like rhythm, tempo, harmony, and other things that are known, and other elements of music that are known to influence the physical and psychosocial responses in humans. It can be both expressive, meaning singing, humming, toning, playing instruments. It can also be receptive, listening. So singing is one expressive intervention that can be effective in reducing symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression. And this might be due to the respiratory changes in the body that are initiated by singing. So maybe you started to feel that as we were humming and toning, we'll get to singing here in a second, but as we were humming and toning, hopefully, and maybe you noticed that your exhalations were starting to be a little longer through that humming and then the toning, and your inhalations were nice and deep, and the exhalations were even longer than those inhalations. Now that is what when we slow those tempos and we sing in groups, we can start to slow our respiration rates and produce sounds that are calming to the nervous system. And in that way, we can sort of give our parasympathetic nervous system a workout, which then strengthens it in times of stress and allows it to help us recover and come back to that homeostatic balance, right? So when we are sort of just simply being, sitting and our typical resting heart rate, our breath rate, it's about 15 breaths a minute is our just kind of standard breath rate baseline. Now, interestingly, when we chant though, our breath seems to slow to about 6 breaths a minute, which is a key respiration rate. It's a circulatory rhythm, which is known as a Meyer wave. It's essentially a 10-second cycle in our blood pressure, which aligns with this rhythm that's shown to provide feelings of calm and well-being while we improve our respiratory and cardiovascular function. So interestingly, if you look back historically at chants and mantras and things like that, you'll kind of start to see this 10-second cycle embedded within all of them. So I would like now to try with you tonight this simple traditional chant or song, which is called Common Ground. With this, I'm going to set the tempo at about 60 beats a minute, which is about somewhere between a 6 to 8 second cycle. So I think it'll allow us to get that experience of singing and breathing together. And so let's try it. I'll keep the chant going for about maybe 4 repetitions, okay? And if you feel like it with me, I'd love for you to sing along at home. If you want to add in, if you're a musician over there and you want to add in some harmonies, feel free. If you want to simply say the words along with it, that's fine. No one over here on this end is gonna know what sounds come out. So just sing your heart out with me a little bit here. So deep breath. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground, so my life can grow on a higher, peaceful ground. I'm going to do it 3 times total. And as you can see, if we can kind of push through those phrases, we can get that elongated breath. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground, so my life can grow on a higher, peaceful ground. One more time. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground. Take my life onto common ground, so my life can grow on a higher, peaceful ground. So maybe you were able, as we sang through that, to start noticing some things. Maybe you became aware a little more of your body in space. Maybe for a minute, while we focused on the words of what might have been a new song to you, maybe you were focusing in on those words and the notes. And so you were really put yourself presently in the moment, and all of that work stuff from the day, it went away for a moment. And thereby, through the momentary mindfulness and by decreasing our respiration rate, you were able to, at least for that moment in time, and maybe even a little bit beyond that, you were able to decrease your stress a little bit. Now, expressive therapy and singing and humming and toning, it's not the only way that music can be used for stress reduction. Music has also been associated with stress reduction, decreased heart rate, lowered blood pressure through receptive music listening. One of the differences, though, is that rather than focusing on regulation through attunement with others when we're singing, for example, music listening might focus more on developing kind of a conditioned response. So we might prepare ourselves for stressful situations by listening to music in a calm environment. In a similar way, if you have a mindfulness practice and a breathing practice, you might do that on a daily basis so that when you do get to those stressful situations, you're able to engage that a little more automatically. We can do that with music. We can prepare ourselves for stressful situations, listening to music in calm environments, and then playing that music when we're in a more stressed environment can help us trigger that prepared response. This is for some of you who are curious about the research out there. I wanted to put a few numbers out there. Does the type of music matter? Well, there's a study called Music Therapy for Stress Reduction from 2022, so it's fairly recent. It's a meta-analysis, and it looked at 47 different studies. So a lot of different studies about music and music listening, and over 2,700 participants through these studies. So there's a lot of people involved in these different studies and a lot of studies, and the effect of these studies were pulled together to examine the overall effects of music therapy. And I pulled out some of the results for you regarding stress reduction. So here we can see that when we're listening to music with the purpose of stress reduction, there are some things that matter. There are some characteristics of music that matter. For example, if we look at the musical style, if the individual in these studies, if the individual is choosing the music, there is a pretty good effect size. And we talk about that a lot in music therapy, about tailoring the experience to individual musical preferences. Now, I think on top of that, if the individual allows for, a music therapist to kind of guide that into a relaxation type of music. So if we're looking at preferred and relaxing, then we see we see a large effect size. So there are some large, significant changes with relaxing music in our music style listening. So, and also interesting, I think, is that classical music has the smallest effect size of all of them. So when we're thinking about it, your choices of music are the most important. Or if you're thinking about this for a friend, your friend's choices are the most important. And uh, also important, relaxing music is the most important. And then it's also important to have your choices on top of that, right? So preference and relaxation are important. And then if we look at the way that the music is delivered, live music does in fact have a larger effect than recorded music. So if we're in the presence of that music that's being produced, that does have a slightly higher effect size. Not a huge one, but a slightly higher effect size. But we see that there can still be fairly decent effects with recorded music. I also wanted to look for a minute at music tempo. So if we look at that kind of sweet spot of 60 beats a minute to 90 beats a minute, that's got the, and I'll talk about that for a second in like the next slide. If we look at that 60 to 90 beats a minute, that's going to be your largest difference. And if there is no specific tempo, so if it's fast or slow, or just kind of all, if the music changes, if the songs change, if the beats per minute change from song to song, then we're not going to see as much of a difference as we might if we stay in that 60 to 90 beats a minute kind of sweet spot. So as we're thinking about all of this, I want you to start thinking about music that that has a special meaning to you. As we saw, kind of preferred music is important. And I've got this listening log here that I have put together. It's hard to see on the slides. I know it's tiny. If you see that, if you go to that QR code, I have uploaded this log so that you have it at home and you can reference it and really start to dig in. And if you're curious about this and how listening to music might affect your stress levels, I encourage you to use that QR code and start examining this listening log. I'm going to talk through it now a little bit for you. So start thinking again of music that has some special meaning to you. In your childhood, were there songs that your family sang or that they listened to? Were you into a certain kind of music in your teenage years that you look back upon fondly? What about movies or concerts, or maybe music that was played at milestone events, celebrations, vacations? Or is there some spiritual or religious music that's important to you? So kind of um, on your own after this, or tomorrow, and in the next few days and or weeks, really start to kind of key in and think about some of those songs. And as we've gone down memory lane here, also think about recent songs that you've heard. Do you listen to music in the car? Do you listen to music in the morning? When exactly, when do you listen to music, and how do you listen to music to affect your mood? Do you use music to calm yourself or to bring energy to a situation? So this listening log is really starting to key into music that brings up fond memories, whether that was yesterday or 20 years ago, and also the types of memories. Or were you dancing? Were you upbeat? Was it a lullaby that helped you relax and sleep? So we want to develop this list, right? Maybe recommended is like maybe 3 songs for each category. So this is going to take a little while for you. Might take a few days, really think and reflect on it. And then take the list and a little bit at a time, play each song. 1 song, 2 songs a day. And as you're listening, just as we did with that singing and the humming and the toning, really tune into your body and start to notice how each song affects you. How it affects your breath rate, how it affects your muscles and your ability to relax, or does it energize your muscles? Does it make you want to get up and dance? And what's your enjoyment now of the piece? Do you still, does it immediately bring those things back, or has it waned a little bit and maybe you want to choose a different song? But really begin to rate and categorize these songs. And these categories are listed for you as well. So they can be attention focusing. So maybe those are the songs that have a really strong rhythm, a driving beat within it that makes you really sit up and pay attention. Or maybe the lyrics are really important to you and you start keying into those lyrics, and all of a sudden your attention went from, the 5 things you have to do after this to that one song that's right in front of you right now. Your attention is focused now in that moment. So there's attention focusing music. And that kind of music we might use to help us provide a distraction from unpleasant tasks or pain or anxiety. So it might be anything from cleaning the house and provide a distraction from that, to I want to focus on that music when I'm having a moment that feels really tense and stressful, and I want to stop focusing on that thought that is going on in my mind, and I want to refocus my attention to something else that's a little less stressful. So it's those attention focusing songs are things that help you relocate your attention. Then we've got energizing music to play when you're tired or you need a boost. It's likely also got a quick tempo and it's upbeat. There's relaxing music. We talked about that a little bit. It's likely soothing, some soft sounds, likely a slower tempo, but that's also going to mean something different to each of us. My slow tempo might not be your slow tempo. My relaxing music may not be the same as your relaxing music. We've also got sleep-inducing music, which might lead you to deep relaxation. This one's not a perfect one. Sleep, it might be challenging. Music may not assist you in drifting off to sleep, and it might be something that you want to try. And then we've got spiritual music. This is music that evokes peace or awe, or invokes a time when you felt those things. It might even cause chills or goosebumps, or a memory of a time when you felt that. So there's a lot of different types of music that can bring up different feelings. So once you have these categories and these preferences and these feelings, you can simply create a listening list that is tailored to your preferences and moods. Or you can take it a little bit further. So if you go back then to your list and you find a song that's maybe around 60 beats a minute. Now, if you're not sure, and I've been talking a lot about beats a minute, if you're not sure about that, you can clap with it. So if you feel pretty confident in your ability to clap along with music, you can clap along with that music. And if you just kind of look at the seconds on your watch, and if you're clapping with each second change, then you've got about a 60 beat per minute song. And the other thing is, if you're totally not sure, there are actually there's websites called things like Song BPM, Song SONG BPM. And you can type in the song that you are the song that you're listening to, and it's going to give you back those beats per minute. And so you can just kind of cheat and put it in that way. And that'll, if you're feeling a little unsure, that should help reduce some of that, anxiety, which we don't want to have happen. So if we start, so once we find something that's in that sweet spot of about 60 to 90 beats a minute, then you want to do something similar to like what we did at the beginning of this evening, where we listen to the music and we breathe in through our nose and we breathe out through our nose with that music. And maybe you do that once a day. A 3-minute song once a day might be a nice starting goal. And eventually, what you may do after you implement this practice for a while, you might find that with this one song, you start to breathe more deeply every time you hear it. And at a certain point, it might just be that when you play that song, you don't have to think about your breathing, but you just sort of subconsciously start breathing in that deep way. You're building kind of a conditioned response, a relationship, really, you could think about with this song. And then you could try playing it through headphones during a stressful work moment. You could play it in your car during those high stress traffic moments, right? So you could start playing this to call your attention to that relaxation response in your body mindfully. And that's one way that you could take that listening log and your listening list even further through some practice with music, right? Now, on the flip side, we can also do this with an energizing playlist, right? So on this one, you'd want to pick something that's a bit quicker, right? That's going to be up to you, whether that's, a walking pace maybe, or a jogging pace. But really, you go back to your energizing playlist, maybe type some of those songs into Song BPM, and really start breathing as that music begins. So you're not necessarily moving immediately while you're walking. You kind of have an idea, but you just start breathing deeply with that music, and then you start kind of moving and breathing, and start that walking pace and see if that helps. And as you are moving, just start going with the music. But I think the important part with this is that you're always evaluating, right? So you're using this music to focus your attention in on that moment, on your breath, on the pace of your breath. If you're choosing to move your body with an energizing playlist, you're starting to also focus in on the movement of your body as well. And perhaps then with that playlist, you start to create that energizing feeling, and maybe you play that playlist while you're something to motivate yourself to get out for that walk in the morning when you're tired, things like that. So you can kind of use that music as a motivator as much as you can use it on the flip side as a relaxation response as well. All right, so this evening then we have fast and furiously, we've examined a few ways that you might be able to start mindfully incorporating music into your life for stress reduction and some well-being. There's so many ways to use music. I can't even, begin to explore all of them in one evening. There's so many ways. The use of music paired with the breath, this is one way that I have found in my research and my work. This is one way that I have found to help people. But if you have been experimenting with other ways, or if through talking about this tonight, it's brought to mind some questions, I'd absolutely love to explore that with you now. So thank you so much. And let's go to some questions.
Thank you so much, Betsy. There's a few questions that have come in already. One of which is, does the sound that surrounds the listener have a greater effect than unidirectional sound? Essentially, do headphones make a difference?
Okay, so I don't know the research on that. So I have to start by saying that. And I do know that meta-analysis that I brought up says that live music is more effective than recorded music. And in the situations in which the recorded music is used in the meta-analysis, I can't even say that. I'm not sure. It's a really good question. And my guess is that when it's coming from a speaker, when it's recorded music, whether it's in headphones or coming out of a speaker, that makes less of a difference than if it's live versus recorded. But again, I'd have to dig into the literature on whether headphones or just simply coming out of a speaker make a bigger difference.
Sounds like a new opportunity for additional research.
Absolutely.
Another question is, can you talk a little more about the frequency of the sound or music and healing?
Ooh, I can. Lisa, is it okay to stop sharing? Is there?
Yes, yeah.
Or okay, all right, cool. All right. So I can talk a little bit about frequency, and to say that it's up for debate. I subscribe to the, I really follow the polyvagal theory, and polyvagal theory tells us that there are sounds that bring us together in community, and that initially, from a long time ago, there's sounds that signaled danger to tribes of people, right? So those really low sounds, the low scary sounds from the animals that were going to come and attack, and then the really high pitched sounds as well. So those high and those extra high and low pitched frequencies are thought, according to that theory, they are thought to send us a little bit more into that stressful fight or flight mode. And in particular, for the musicians out there, middle C, C4, I believe, and then down to about middle C to an octave below middle C and an octave above middle C. That's in polyvagal theory, that's really the sweet spot of the frequencies that are going to really signal safety and bring us together in community and help us regulate with one another. There are other theories when we're talking about, there's other music therapy literature, though, when we're talking about things like lullabies that say, some moms sing at a lower, some caregivers, not always moms, sometimes it's dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, caregivers, they may sing at a lower frequency than what that polyvagal theory says makes us feel safe sound. And so in that case, and in that research, it talks a lot about, using music for attachment and co-regulation. And when we're doing that, those frequencies, I think there's a little more wiggle room if you're looking around at those theories. But if we're talking about listening for decreasing stress and improving wellness, it's those the C below middle C to the C above middle C that really kind of signal safety for us.
Next question is, do you have any advice on practices for instrumental musicians?
Hmm. The if we're talking about string instruments, that's one thing. If we're talking about wind instruments are very similar to singing. If we're looking at playing wind instruments kind of for relaxation, right? There are so many cognitive things that go into it as well. So it's not always so. As an oboist, I wouldn't necessarily say that playing the oboe even long tones necessarily relaxed me all the time. However, there are those deep breaths and things that that conceptually are similar. And then if we're looking at string instruments, the guitar, piano, I think there is literature out there that says simply not necessarily around the respiration rate, but around that mindful awareness that we're bringing to the music that can help kind of trigger that stress response where we're bringing our attention to something else other than that the stressor itself.
Next question is, do we know why classical music has been researched and is shown not to be quite as effective?
I did not look at the particular studies. My guess and things that I've read in the past is I would guess that it's the wide range of classical music because we're looking at there's a lot of different, Tchaikovsky is very different from Mozart, is very different from Bach, and all the way to Cage, right? Like there's such a wide range of classical music, and some of it for sure, a second movement adagio of something is going to get you into that 60 to 90 beats a minute, a respiration rate versus your first movement or your final movement or that scherzo in the middle, that's going to be a lot quicker. I also would imagine, again, not research, this is my opinion, music that is created to be relaxing is probably going to include those relaxing frequencies, whereas you have a much wider spectrum of frequencies with classical music.
This is the last question we have typed in so far. So if any folks have additional questions, go ahead and share those right now. You can type it into the chat or the Q&A feature. The last one is, why is music in a minor key often perceived as sad or melancholy?
I I love that. That's another piece that I like to talk about often is that we can co-regulate with we can exist with others and communicate our emotions without saying a word when we play music. Usually the example that I give is like you can play Mary Had a Little Lamb, right? Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. But now if I go to minor, all of a sudden now we're really sad about Mary's lamb, right? Like and so I can go from that happy to sad emotion communication without really saying a word. Now, why is minor associated with sad and major associated with happy, and augmented associated with other different types of feelings? I think that um, that goes beyond the little niche of research, the channel of research that I have looked into. I think that probably has to do with um, if we go back in the history of music and we go into like the evolutionary history of things and why different emotions are associated with different sounds in music. That is completely off the cuff, though. There may be some actual scientific reasons why those frequencies make a difference. But I love the fact that that got brought up because I love talking about the fact that we can use music to communicate our emotions with each other and to regulate with one another without using words that sometimes, especially in moments of stress, really can inhibit us. The words don't always come easy, but sometimes, you know, music and being able to call up that music does.
Betsey, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your lovely voice this evening. And thanks to all of you for joining us, and we hope you stay engaged with the Osher Center. You can join us at future events. You'll also receive a follow-up email with the opportunity to provide feedback and to learn more about us. We'll also send along the listening log and links to our upcoming events. You can also email us at osher.integrative@uc.edu. Thanks again for joining us. Stay well and enjoy the rest.